because otherwise I will forget. We'll give everybody just another quick minute here. I think there's a few of us still coming in. All right, let's go ahead and get started as people keep coming through, and then we'll.
That's how we see it. It's a key demographic in the state. In 2016, voters. All
right. I'm going to ask people to mute themselves again. Please make sure you're muted. If you have any sound going on in your background, it'll pick up and it'll interfere with people's enjoyment of the presentation. So let's avoid that. Thank you. First of all, thank you all for being here tonight. It's great to see some of you. It really is so important to be able to touch base. Those of you who've reached out, thank you very much. Let me see if I can move forward here. So this week, this Thursday, is the annual Shakeout. And as we know, the more we practice something, the better we get at it and the more muscle memory we can develop. So please consider participating in the Shakeout. And if you have forgotten what that means, you know, it's the process of what happens during an earthquake. What should we do during the earthquake? Drop, cover, and hold on. If you want to sign up with your family or make a team with friends, you can do that at shakeout.org. They make it kind of fun. It is the world's largest earthquake drill. There are other graphics for other situations, in particular people with mobility limitations. Keep in mind that just because you're not using a cane or a walker now.
You can't hear yourself, so you don't notice that.
Folks, you gotta mute yourself.
No, you can't. I get that.
I can't keep up with everybody. Thank you. Let's go back here. So if you're not using a cane or a walker right now, remember you may have a surgery or you may not, be well. So the dynamics in your household may change. So keep in mind, these are some tips if you are limited in your mobility and you use some sort of device. There are other things you can do during an earthquake if you cannot get underneath a table. I wanted to remind you, all of you should know this, and thank you to all of you who have already responded and sent in your page 9 of your SOP, the Standard Operating Procedure. We have a revised SOP that reflects the fact that we're consolidated now, so we've changed a few things up, but we also put a lot of detail into this SOP, so there's a lot of great information there about the CERT program for you to review, and we hope you'll do that. And then send in page 9. If you're interested in taking on other roles, which are also there listed in the SOP, then there are signature sheets that go with those roles, and please take a look at those and please consider doing that. Meanwhile, the fire department and CERT have been terribly active in the last several weeks. Last week was Fire Prevention Week. We did several story times with a firefighter, including a live streamed one that had about 33 kids participating, and Captain Josh McGurk read a story and then was doing question Q&A with them, and it was a lot of fun, and he did a terrific job with that, and it was a great event. That website is still up if you're interested in taking a look. There's interactive games and lots of different videos. How fast can a firefighter get dressed, and a tour of the fire engine and that sort of thing. If you have young kids in your life, they'll probably get a kick out of that, and I hope you can check it out. CERT was also the main reason that a pop-up COVID test site could be set up in an underserved neighborhood. So we were able to get that done. As you can see, the PPE was very involved with face shields and N95 masks and gloves and plexiglass at certain points where we were interacting with people. We also took advantage of giving out some good information on disaster preparedness. So it was a really good event. All in all, we were hoping to do 100 people. We ended up with 126 tests, and so that really was a fantastic event. So that could not have been possible without CERT. So thank you for those of you who were able to participate. And now it's not going forward. Hold on, there we go. And we've also obviously been moving on to Zoom. This is our part of our training from last month, and you're here tonight, so that's really great. We also helped with the evacuation center during one of the fires. So that was really a great thing for us. The week prior to the COVID pop-up test site, we went out, about 15 of your fellow CERTs were out in the neighborhood. If you ever participated in Silver Dragon, this was a real Silver Dragon on a smaller scale where we participated and went out and gave public health information and the COVID information to the neighbors. So that helped a lot. So as you can see, we've been very active. There is a hybrid CERT course taking place right now. We are in week 6 of the hybrid CERT course. It is growing here in our San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department CERT, and we need your help as much as always. So even though it doesn't seem like there's a lot going on, there really is. So please take a look at the SOP and please consider what roles, if any, you would be interested in taking on and being considered for. So thank you for that. Our next CE class, continuing education class, will be next month, November 10th. We're trying to do them once a month. We will take a break in December, but the next one is going to be Pets and Disasters with Jan Brown. Registration will be via Neon. I will email when that is open and ready to go. And if you are on social media and you are on Twitter, we have a new Twitter handle, and that's it right there on the screen. So please consider following us. You're in for a treat tonight. Dr. John Chamberlain is a clinical psychologist, associate professor at UCSF, and a longtime CERT member and a former neighborhood leader himself. And we really appreciate his time and help with that today, and being able to give us some look at the important part of taking care of ourselves as well as our team. And it's important to remember that even at a time like this when we may not be working as a team. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so he can share his. Go ahead, John, and share your screen.
Okay.
So during the time of the presentation, if you have any questions, I have the chat up right now. But before John starts, to keep me honest, I have written a number on this pad of paper. And what I want you to do now is sign in the chat room with your name and email. You can do it to me privately. So when you put your name in, you can do it to me privately. And then whatever number who signed in that I have written here is going to win one of our new vests, a fleece vest that was donated to us by Matt Schmidt. It was, he ordered a large. He feels that it fits, the sizing is a little bit too large for him. So he donated it to us, and go ahead and if you're the right person signing in today, then you get to win the large fleece large fleece vest. It's a green vest with our logo on it, and it's really cool looking. And if you haven't had a chance to look at the CERT store, please do so. Sign in, please. Name and email address. You can do it to me privately. And John, all yours.
Okay, great. Well, welcome everyone. I'm John Chamberlain. I'm a professor of psychiatry up at UC San Francisco, and have had an interesting and different career because I started off in general surgery before doing psychiatry, and now in addition to clinical stuff, I also do a lot of forensic evaluations. And when the pandemic was just getting underway and UCSF was trying to figure out how they were going to respond in different ways, our department, the Department of Psychiatry, was asked to develop plans for helping out patients as well as faculty, staff, and other employees at UCSF with how to deal with what was essentially a disaster that was coming of unknown size, duration, intensity, and how to deal with that. So part of what I did, I was sort of the one who came up with how to develop our clinical responses to that and manage it. So we'll talk a little bit about like how we did that, and actually the fact that it was based on FEMA and CERT principles in large part. Although my kids who have participated in a large number of CERT practice activations, and so have picked up all the triage stuff, pointed out to me that our color scheme did not include all the colors that CERT would mandate. So you can, when we get to that part, you'll see how that goes. But just getting started with some basics of disaster psychology. I like to go back because I think we all need to be on the same page. So what is a disaster? And basically, lots of ways to define it, but it's a situation where there's some threat to the environment, property, health, and life. So lots of different things can happen, like, oh my God, McDonald's like screwed up my order. Might be a disaster, I suppose, depending on how tenuous your health is or like how like rough the environment is, but most people would say it needs a little bit more than that. It also represents the tragedy that's associated with either human-made or natural hazards that negatively impact the environment or society. An oil spill. If we like do something and there's like a major cataclysmic disaster, we engineer a bridge wrong and it collapses, etc. Now, there's also natural disasters, hurricanes, floods, tornadoes, earthquakes, tsunamis, etc., volcanoes. And natural disasters kill about 1 million people per decade worldwide. So there are varieties of sources of disasters, variety of severity in terms of cost, depending on whether we do it by human lives lost, years of lives lost, property, the threat to life, etc. Now, obviously, we want to be mindful of people's psychology, and that trauma and disasters can be very triggering and overwhelming psychologically. So, but just to sort of put us in the frame of mind, I'm going to show some videos and people can sort of imagine where they were if they can remember these things, or what they might have been thinking had they been part of this. And obviously you can look away. This is actual like footage from some real events. Nothing like gory or anything, but can be kind of intense. But just want to sort of point out this idea that people react differently, and I'd encourage you to look at how different people react and see if you see yourself or people you know metaphorically in the room.
At 5:04 p.m., Latin American Studies 1 was underway at UC Santa Cruz. With video cameras everywhere, this was the most visible earthquake ever.
Now, I would argue the infant, the toddler, clearly was the most CERT trained and prepared person in this entire video. Dropped, covered, and held on. So, you know, clearly to Sandra's point, like, you know, the great American shakeout. obviously, one of the things that happens with disasters like this is it's not like you saw it coming. You didn't have a whole lot of warning. You're in a class, all of a sudden it's shaking, lamps are literally falling down, you're on a volleyball court, people are running for the hills. You know, as we might remember, this is Loma Prieta, so like part of the Bay Bridge collapsed. Pretty overwhelming. Sort of another sort of compilation of different ones. Just, again, kind of see if you recognize yourself in any of these or how you might react. I will say I would probably be the guy towards the middle who seems to be having a good time just like swimming during all this, because I'm not that bright, but obviously this one is from a long time ago, because otherwise there'd be a bunch of people with cell phones like clearly filming like the vibrating pool water, I'm sure. This one might be my favorite because there's the mystery person who sort of jumps in the pool at the end for no apparent reason other than the water sloshing. And again, that would probably be me. But you can see people react very differently to the same situation. We have some people who are high stepping and running. That we had in one of the videos, a person sort of seeming to like almost be trying to like maintain their balance. We have the CERT trained toddler, and we have like other people who are like hopping in the swimming pool to sort of ride it out. So disaster strikes, but the disaster is the event and maybe pours into the tragedy. Trauma is a little bit different, although it's related, and trauma is much more of a personal experience. So what did you lose? What were you threatened with? Was that an injury, a death, a near death, property destruction? There was a great case on a show that was about engineering disasters that aired a few years ago, and this guy was talking about how he was talking with his partner, standing side by side in a hotel lobby, and a walkway collapses. And he sort of turned to say something to the partner and just sort of sees a blur, and all of a sudden realizes his partner's gone, and this walkway that weighed several tons had like just collapsed on him and others. And, there's the loss. This guy wasn't physically touched or harmed or anything. It was like kind of a 1 in a million shot, but the potential to be harmed himself, in addition to like losing a loved one literally that close, can be sources of trauma. You might lose normal routine or home, your connections to like kind of your normal sense of reality, safety and security. We all have, in psychiatry, we talk about like mental maps or cognitive schema, and you basically have a map of the world. Like, how do I get from Foster City to Belmont to San Mateo? How do I get from Hillsdale Mall over to, Sarah High School or something like that? But you also have mental maps of how the world's supposed to work. So if someone walks up to me and says like, "Hi, John, how are you doing?" and I throw a shoe at their head, it's like upsetting. And from a psychological standpoint, the reason it's upsetting is because it doesn't fit with your map of the world. That's not how people are supposed to interact. So it's upsetting in addition to the fact my shoe might be smelly and hit you in the head. But, you know, it's a lot of different things. And when you have a disaster and you have trauma, that sense of how the world is supposed to work is really shaken in many cases. Now, in CERT, we're in kind of a unique or not a unique, but we're in an interesting perspective or place, much like first responders, much like people in medical situations where you have like the issues that you can suffer, personal losses, family, friends, loved ones, what they're going through. But you're also like in all these helping professions, you're going to be particularly exposed to vicarious trauma and what's called compassion fatigue. You're working in your neighborhood. You're seeing your neighborhood destroyed. Maybe the school where your kids played, the park where you like to hang out, your friends or coworkers or neighbors who've gone through stuff. And that is traumatizing to deal with. And you see that a lot, again, in first responders, nurses, physicians, et cetera. But the compassion fatigue part is where you just mentally don't have the energy to really mount caring anymore. And if I could find it, there was a great like lighthearted example of this from the show Cheers from the 80s and 90s, if anyone remembers Norm from Cheers. And Norm's just like the happy barfly, and he gets a job at this company where they're like, basically you have to fire everyone. So it'd be like, hi, Sandy, like, come on into the bar. And Norm would just break down crying because he felt so bad about what he was doing. And it would be like the people he's firing are like buying him drinks to like, you know, it's okay, calm down, man. I'll find something else. I'll land on my feet and all this. And at the end, he goes to fire someone and he's just like talking about how he can't do it anymore. And the guy comes in, he's like, okay, yeah, man, you're fired. And it'd be like, hey, Sandra, sorry, you're fired. You're out. And the person's like, wait, where are the tears? Where's the compassion? What happened? And he's like, I'm just cried out, man. I got nothing. And that was the only guy who got mad at him. And Norm then felt bad for himself. But it's a great example of compassion fatigue. You just can't mount the response to say, like, I feel horrible for you. I give up. And that's like kind of on the way to burnout. It's a component of being burnt out where you're just like, I'm done. Go away. Now, what is traumatic? There's no good answer. It varies person to person. Even if you go to combat situations like horrible warfare, combat situations, it's half or less of the people who are exposed to that develop like post-traumatic stress disorder or other related conditions. People just are fairly resilient. And, you know, what I tend to say is, again, there's sort of this reserve that you have to deal with it. And if your tank is pretty full going in, it's more likely that you're going to like be able to have the mental energy to like handle what you're seeing. But if you give it has nothing to do with strength or toughness. I want to emphasize that. The right amount of trauma at the right time of the right kind will get anyone. And if you provide enough trauma to someone, they will get like problems. They might get burnout. They might get depressed. They might get anxious. They might get PTSD. They, you know, turning to like substances of various kinds. So it's right there. Like I started out in general surgery. Someone cuts off an arm. It's kind of unpleasant. It's unfortunate. I know what to do. It doesn't really bother me that much. Eye trauma though, somebody gets poked in the eye with something, I get the willies. I'm like, yeah, don't like it. Don't want to deal with it. So, yeah, that's more traumatic to me than the other. So just, it happens out there. You know, but again, if there's a bad enough trauma, it will affect people. So like after 9/11, there was a survey that showed 44% of adults reported at least one substantial symptom of stress. And if you said like, okay, well, not just like, is it bad, but do you have some stress related symptom? And here are these sort of standardized symptoms that people might express after experience after trauma. It was over 90% of the people had something. So it gets to us. It doesn't, again, it doesn't matter how tough you are or how well trained you are or anything, all that can be overcome. So what are some other things that contribute to this? Like you have a reserve in your body, in your brain, in your physical rest of your body, your mind, and depending on what you're dealing with, you might have more or less reserve. So there's lots of things that can hit you. If you have poor nutrition, you're just like existing on carbs only or fat only. You're not getting like adequate nutrients and an adequate diet. Psychological stress, your boss is a jerk. You're having to listen to John Chamberlain talk to you on a Tuesday night, you know, like all these things. High blood sugar, you've got diabetes or pre-diabetes. You have chronic inflammation, you have an autoimmune disease, you have MS, you have infections, physical stress, like, you know, you have a broken limb or chronic pain. Any kind of toxicity like substance use and stuff tends to actually decrease the reserve that you have. And it's interesting that all these sources of potential stress, one, they can add together to add stress to you and make you more vulnerable to trauma, but they all have the same sort of biochemical response. Like our brains and our bodies, as amazing as they are, in many ways have a pretty limited repertoire of what they're going to do. So like if I hit my finger with a hammer, my brain, if you just looked at the biochemical responses to my brain and my endocrine system, my nervous system, my endocrine system, it can't tell you, you wouldn't be able to tell the difference if I just won an exciting chess match, if I ran a marathon, if I had a heart attack, if I had any of these other things going on. The short, immediate term response is a release of adrenaline. Your adrenal glands, which sit in your mid-back above your kidneys, release adrenaline. And we'll talk a little bit about what that does. And then longer term, to kind of keep dealing with ongoing stress, so not just like whack my finger with a hammer, but let's say like chronic diabetes, chronic pain, long-term infections that aren't getting better, you get this other steroid hormone release called cortisol, and these things are designed in the body to help us, but if they go on too long or they're too intense or they get activated at the wrong time, that causes problems, and that's a lot of the psychological stress and distress that we see in disasters and other traumas. So real simple. We were just having a talk at UCSF for our residents about neuroscience and the importance of learning it. So they don't get to see this slide because they'd get mad at how like less detailed it is than what they have to learn, but it's good enough for most of what we do. So you got your brain, your spinal cord, and then you have nerves coming out. And one part of your nervous system is called the autonomic nervous system, or some people call it the automatic nervous system. And it basically is like the operating system on your computer. It's just functioning in the background. You don't know about it. You don't have to think about it, which is good because it does things like controls your heart beating or makes you breathe, helps you do digestion. You know, we don't have to stop and say digest, 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 like, you know, and don't pee. You know, dang it, I lost control of my bladder because I was thinking about digestion. You know, it's not like that. A lot of these things are controlled. That system divides into two. And this will come back to a little bit why this matters later, but you have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. The sympathetic is where you think of fight or flight or freeze or faint, as we talk about later here in CERT. This is the big adrenaline rush system. You get an adrenaline rush that is coming from this part of the nervous system. What does it do? Your heart beats faster. You start breathing faster and deeper because you're trying to get oxygen in. You don't salivate. Your pupils dilate. You don't digest. You get blood, sugar released into your blood so your body has an energy source. You don't keep moving food and, you know, excrement through your intestines. You basically are prepared to like fight for your life, and you don't worry about like digesting a nice, say, Thanksgiving meal while you're trying to fight for your life. The parasympathetic is the opposite, and these two sort of balance each other. If you turn up one, the other gets turned down. The parasympathetic is rest and relaxation and recovery. Your pupils get smaller. You can salivate, you digest. Your breathing slows down, your heart rate slows down. You're doing things to like digest food, and that might be when it's time to go to the bathroom, you know? So this is like kind of all systems are working well. This is an emergency. And we'll talk about it because this tends to be on too intense, too long, and maybe at the wrong time when people have like problems with anxiety, PTSD, they're stressed out, they're burnt out. And so we'll be talking about ways to try to sort of tamp this response down. 5 F's. So when we're in a stressful situation, an emergency situation, you know, there's evolution. Everybody in the gene pool who was sitting in like rolling grass plains hundreds of thousands of years ago who said, oh, look at the pretty cute kitten coming bounding over towards me, I'm going to go pet him. They got out of the gene pool fast. Like everyone who survived did a few things. They either ran, they fought it, they played dead, they did something to try to survive. Going and petting the big snarly tooth, like lion, tiger thing was not a good way to survive. So we have adapted to deal with stress. Now, freeze, a loud noise. You hear an explosion. You get bad news. You're sort of like stopping for a moment, like what? You know, and you see this, like if you might have even experienced this, like you're walking and you get a call and you pick up the phone and you're like, somebody says something and you just literally stop. You freeze. You're trying to like only focus on getting in the information to tell you what's going on. Flight, obviously you're trying to run away. Fight, you're like, you know, doing something to combat this threat. That could be throwing a punch. That could be, you know, like in surgery, we would like, you know, pull out the paddles because we've got to like get somebody's heart beating the right way. And we would, and I trained in Michigan for surgery, so we'd call it a Detroit Edison consult, which meant we're like using electricity to shock you. So here would be a PG&E consult. Fright. It can actually be so overwhelming that you literally just sort of like can't move, can't do anything. So you might like play dead, or you're just overwhelmed and sitting there and you might actually faint. And these are based on the responses of this sympathetic nervous system. That's all controlling all this stuff. Fainting is usually you're sort of ping-ponging back and forth between these two. Usually that you get a big rush of this and then you suddenly, for some reason, your body converts over to this and you pass out. So we have these things. These are just part of our physiology, and it's hard to know what you're going to get. You know, I can still remember as an intern getting a call. I was on call. I'm the only doctor in this hospital. And they're like, they page me in the middle of the night from the ER, and I pick up, and I've been a doctor. I'm super experienced because I've been a doctor for like 4 weeks. And they're like, hey, a steam turbine exploded at this factory and the guy's coming in with burns and shrapnel wounds. And my first thought and statement was, wow, you should really call a doctor. Followed fortunately, before I said it out loud, in my brain as I started to say it, like, was immediately followed by, holy crap, I'm the doctor. And then I was like, okay, so I'll be right down. And then I'm like walking down the hallway going like, oh God, like shrapnel wounds. Like, what do you do with a shrapnel wound? Like, this is not good. And, sort of like, but it gave me time to like talk myself down from these to like being able to come up with some semblance of a plan. Okay. So now if this stress goes on for a long time, you get cortisol release. This is this hormone, this steroid that comes out. And hey, it does some good things under stress. It will make your blood sugar go up. Our brains almost exclusively use sugar to survive. So that's why people get really goofy if their blood sugar goes low, because their brain's basically starving and can't function right. So cortisol, it forces the sugar up, so the brain's getting fed. You might actually pay greater attention and remember things better. Anyone here want to raise their hand if you ever crammed for a test the night before? Oh, everybody studied well in advance. Come on. Okay. Thank you for being honest, folks. Okay. So yeah, there is something to that. Under stress, if you're under the right amount of stress, your memory and attention get better. Not for long, but like long enough to like maybe cram for a test. Now, your blood pressure goes up and you need that. Your blood flow, you need to like get blood out to like all the muscles. You need blood going to your brain so you're ready to react. Now, the problem is if it keeps on going, it has some bad effects that tend to start taking over the longer you have this going on. Short-term, increased blood pressure, getting blood flow to your muscles. Long-term, hypertension, not good. Increased blood sugar, short-term, fuel to fight off the threat. Long-term, diabetes, prediabetes, not good. It tends to suppress the immune system because in the short term, it's fine. You want energy directed to other things. But if it's not shutting down, you're more prone to infections. Decreased serotonin. Serotonin is a chemical in our brain that seems to play a role in mood and anxiety. So if you have less serotonin action around, you tend to be more anxious and depressed. Also, interestingly, you tend to get more impulsive. So there are people who get impulsively violent, impulsively self-harming when they have low serotonin. So you can imagine people might act out more. You get decreased sensitivity to pain. And one of the things that I always mistake on this slide is if you have like high levels of cortisol and these other steroid hormones around, it's actually toxic to your brain over long periods of time. You actually get like the neurons, the nerve cells start shrinking and the connections start breaking down because cortisol going up, the growth factors that support normal healthy brain growth and health tend to go down. So we try to reverse this in many ways by decreasing the stress, but it's better if you don't get the process started. So when we're in trauma, on top of all these sort of basic physiologic things that go on, well, hey, if you're not like paying attention to school because you're worried about friends or loved one, or you're not paying attention to work, you might not do as well there. You might get really pessimistic and hopeless about the future. What's the point? Yeah, I worked so hard, my house got washed away in this flood. Might be hard to make decisions because again, we only have a limited amount of bandwidth, and it's filled with like worries and thoughts and energy being devoted to like solving problems or thinking about the issues that we've got in one area. You might be less able to reallocate that and move it where you need it to be. It's tiring if you're always getting an adrenaline rush. Like if you're constantly on edge through the adrenaline or eventually cortisol, and every time there's a noise, every time someone says something, every time there's a bright light that flashes or the lights ahead above you flicker, or you hear a rumbling noise because a truck goes by and you think it's the next big earthquake, it's exhausting because you never get that downtime mentally. You might find yourself having thoughts and memories about the event, And one of the key things that's very interesting with trauma, unlike the movies, is oftentimes people don't remember parts of the event. It's not like the movies, like a bullet is coming at me and I'm like seeing it in super slow-mo and I'm just like watching everything and it's in vivid HD. It's things are moving fast and I'm not sure how I got here. You know, like I was walking down the street and next thing I know, there's a light and then I've got some blood on me and I hear people screaming and some guy's trying to put me in the ambulance and asking him if I'm okay and who my emergency contacts are and if I know where I am, and they're saying they're from CERT. That's kind of like more common trauma reactions. The dreams and flashbacks are kind of similar to the intrusive memories. It's just your brain is replaying this over and over again and again. It's disconcerting to not remember stuff, especially a big important thing, because what's the common thing? Like, well, if it's like really that impactful, you should remember it. But you're not getting, again, any downtime. Physical reactions. You get stress. Muscles get tense. You get headaches. You get muscle aches all over. If you can imagine, like going back to that slide where sometimes you're relaxed and your gut is moving stuff through, but you're on adrenaline, you know, your stomach and intestines are not going to move things through normally. So you might get an adrenaline rush of sweating. You might get an adrenaline rush where you don't feel like eating because your gut's not moving stuff through and digesting. It might move through suddenly very fast and you get diarrhea. If it backs up, you might get nauseous. If you do fall asleep, you may wake up feeling tired, even if you got like your normal 8 hours, because it wasn't restful. You know, again, you get pounding heart, rapid breathing, feeling edgy, adrenaline sort of symptoms. You might give up good activities because you're so distracted and tired, you're not exercising. You're just like, screw it, I'm going to eat like whatever I want. And to some extent, that's okay. But you might give up other regular healthcare things. You might be impulsive. That's where the safe sex comes in, and substances. You're just eating crappy food, like, you know. And if you ever wonder, does that actually happen? Go to an emergency room, like in the back room, or a clinic where the doctors and nurses and other staff congregate. And anyone ever been in those? That is not like a healthy diet place. And I work in a bariatric surgery clinic part-time. The amount of junk food and crap that they're like eating while telling patients like, hey, you know, you need to like eat lots of fruits and vegetables and they'll be exercising well, is like the height of hypocrisy. So emotional reactions, again, kind of, you're numb. You might be shocked, you might be nervous, you might be helpless, you might be fearful, you might be depressed, but you also might just be numb and just like, I can't really feel anything. And some of that might be with these thoughts of like, what's the point? You might get like irritable. You might get the outbursts of anger or get agitated. This is not normally like Rambo, like, you know, you go and destroy a small town's police department or something like that. That's pretty rare sort of stuff. It's more like you might lash out at a person close to you, like, hey, F you and this and that, and you're horrible and you never were any good. You know, it might be like your kids, it might be your spouse, it might be a friend or a family member. Might be hard to control or trust that a situation's going to go because the world has become unpredictable. Like I was talking about those mental maps. So how do I know if I'm talking to this person, I can actually trust them? Because like I used to think if I drove home, there wasn't going to be a big earthquake where like the road was going to collapse under me, you know? So how, you know, this person, are they actually more reliable than an engineered bridge? You know, these things kind of come in. People might retreat because they're trying to focus on themselves, but not necessarily in a healthy way. They might not be concerned about others because that might be defensive. It might be the compassion fatigue where you just don't have the energy to do it. It might be a combination. Now, I like to show this slide because it kind of, I think, frames it nicely of like, okay, trauma and disasters are overwhelming. Here's a disaster. Clearly there's a flood. I doubt like anyone designed this walkway with all the garbage on it. or that this house was underwater, or this house is really underwater. And, you know, goodness knows what's happening out here. And this poor guy just looking like, yeah, where do you start? The world is upside down. What am I going to do? It's overwhelming. And this is like kind of a pretty natural state to be in with a big disaster. But if we let ourselves like kind of just go along with this, it's going to burn everybody out fast, because you're not going to obviously fix all this stuff right away. So you want to be watchful for burnout. I'll give everybody a moment. Come on, it's a match that burned out. Okay. This is one of my favorite cartoons, but okay. Thank you, Sandra. So what tends to happen with burnout? As the scale goes, your work output and satisfaction go down. Work is unfulfilling. You're not very productive at work. And as it goes along this way, you have more of a feeling of emptiness and worthlessness. Like, work is not great, I'm not great, and then it gets to work is bad, I'm bad, and I'm not getting anything done. It often starts out, you have excessively high expectations. I am going to fix that problem. Man, I got you. I am jumping off that walkway and swimming out to you and going to start, I don't know, start the sump pump in your basement. We're going to get this all pumped out and it'll be fine. You're working hard. You're doing everything you can, but you're not seeing any results. It's not going anywhere. You work even harder and there's still no results. And it's not ending, because like no matter how many pails of water, say, that guy gets, or how long he pumps his sump pump, he is not pumping out like whatever lake or ocean flooded his town. And then you start getting burnt out. You start getting angry at others. Why isn't this working? What's going on? You get exhausted. You start becoming cynical, despair, hopelessness. There's nothing that's ever going to happen, and you finally just sort of mentally and or physically collapse. So this is burnout. We want to intervene as high up and as far to the left as you can. Hey, you're not going to fix this. We as a team are not going to fix this. You know, like, it's going to take a lot of time and effort, but each of us has to do just our part of this job to get through this. So you want to pace yourself, pace your help, and be the tortoise. Slow and steady wins the race. I love this one because, in contrast to the other one, now instead of the lone person trying to fight the battle, we have a team. This is not all that much better. It's a little drier than the other guy's disaster, but here's a team. Look, they're carrying supplies. They've got tons of water for their team. They're talking, they're interacting, they're actually together. They maybe have like kind of a plan. So I kind of like this as like sort of, you know, don't just run around frenetically. You got to start thinking about taking care of yourself and those with you. So, gonna just, since this is recorded, a lot of these slides I'm just gonna leave for you to think about. If we were obviously in a room, we'd be able to like interact more with this, but like, when you think about what is resilience, what does it mean to you? Its definition, the ability to bounce back, bounce forward, as some people like to say, from tough times. But want you to think about, for you, what would that look like? You know, and think about a time you or someone else has been resilient and what that meant. You know, I liked, for example, as much as I hate the Dallas Cowboys as an organization and football team, I did like the fact that their quarterback, who was injured, like, you know, he looked understandably miserable and in pain when his leg got broken badly this weekend. But now he's in the hospital and he started to work on like, what is going to be the next stage in my life? Like, am I going to be like, getting my rehab done and my renegotiating contracts, like other things and other activities, that to me says resilience. Here's a guy who just doesn't stay down, but he's also not like doing crazy stuff like jumping up and trying to like run a pass pattern or a play for the NFL anymore, right now at least. So just think about what it would mean for you, because this is going to be one of the things that will tell you what some of the good self-care activities for you are. And maybe as you get to know your teammates in CERT, what would be good for them, and kind of have an ongoing discussion. How do you reduce your own stress? So you're going to know what works for you. You want to plan how to manage stress and de-stress and relax before you have to. We make a big mistake in this country that we feel that relaxing is the absence of activity. Relaxation is actually quite an impressive activity, and it is an activity. You have to actively be involved. And it's not just like sort of sit and veg out. That might work sometimes for some people, but it tends not to work all that well for very long. And like any activity, you have to practice it ahead of time to be good at it. I often tell my patients, you know, you don't want to take up jogging when a minibus is bearing down on you in San Francisco. You don't want to take up weightlifting when there's a big boulder on your foot. You know, you want to be prepared to deal with situations. So what are some basics? Get enough sleep. Exercise regularly. 30 minutes a day. That's the common answer. And adequate exercise, if you want like kind of a easy thing, moderate intensity exercise is good for our mood. Moderate intensity, you're a little out of breath. If I say hi to you, you probably don't want to talk to me, because you could say I'm okay, how are you? But you would prefer to save your breathing for the exercise. If you look down, you should see a little bit of a light sweat on your arms. Your skin should be a little shiny. That's moderate exercise. Eating a balanced diet. Fruits, vegetables, protein. Have a little snack. You know, it's not the end of the world to have a treat now and again. Work, play, rest. De-stress at the end of the day. Before you go to bed, have a routine where you unwind. To the extent you can, leave work at work. Connect with other people. If you're into it, use spiritual resources. If you're not, you can still do things like meditate or mindfulness, just sort of slowing down, being present in the moment. It's okay to get help as well as to give it. It's okay to like receive caring as well as to give caring to others. You're not just a helper. And a lot of times I think people in caring professions sort of feel like not only is their identity that of a helper, but their value is how many people I help and how selfless I can be. And it becomes almost a contest of like, if I can suppress my needs more than you can suppress your needs, I'm better than you are. You know, when you're coming back from a CERT deployment, talk to your loved ones. Let them know how to support you. And ideally not like you're doing it wrong, you bleeping stupid bleepity bleep, you know, but hey, that was really rough. You know, you don't want to give out confidential information like, well, can you believe Sally next door? Like, boy, let me tell you what she was like in this situation. No, that was really rough. There are a lot of people in need. Like, you know, I can't believe I tried to help and I couldn't, you know, but that might be it. But also just letting them know, like, I need to just vent. I need like 30 minutes to be alone, you know, whatever it is. If you're on the receiving end of that, when you have the urge to talk, it's probably better to listen. Maybe ask a question about like, what was that like for you? Or how can I help you? What would be useful? but don't force them to. Like they used to do critical incident debriefing. And like, okay, like there's a big event, a shooting, a bad fire, you know, natural disaster. Okay, everybody at the end of your shift, you have to go see the counselor and like go through this. It actually doesn't help. It arguably hurts things because you take people who don't need it and you force them to go through it. And you know, what tends to work better is make support available, destigmatize it, normalize it, that like, hey, we all need support. We all have to find our own way to get support, and then let people gravitate to what works for them. So emergency care walls, excellent idea. And you might do things like this, like these are just ideas, but like for if I'm feeling sad, lonely, doubting myself, if I have other things, for worry, anger, could be calming music, your favorite movie, best friend's phone number. I can't do this, I can't do it, I'll never be able to do it, I'm a loser. Well, maybe there's some reasons why you're not a loser. The stress ball, favorite books, a bear, you know, it doesn't really matter. I tell people, like, you know, I do a lot with people with anxiety, and I see people all the time who say, like, how do you relax? Okay, well, do X. Sandra, you know how to relax? You need to listen to the sounds of the ocean on your iPod and just have like this mantra about like how great it is to be at the ocean and you're lying on the sand and it's warm. And Sandra's like, oh my God, I hate the sand. It gets everywhere. It's itchy. You know, I had this horrible experience at the beach. You know, okay, well, go to the meadow. Go to the meadow. I have a grass allergy. What the hell is the matter with you, Chamberlain? Like, that's horrible. I had one person tell me the most relaxing place I picture myself is in Vegas. And I was like, alrighty then. Like, not what I would picture as relaxing at all, but it doesn't matter what would relax me. It's what would relax you. So when you're coming up with your emergency care wall or any of these other activities, let people know what works for you and have your plan ahead of what relaxes you. There's no like mantra of relaxation. Yes.
A quick question, John. So I would create this emergency board wall for myself.
Yep.
Should I post it somewhere where my husband and my family can see it?
Excellent question. I would say it's up to you. Like, how much do you want to share? I think it's great to have the parts that you're comfortable sharing. You know, if you have something silly that you would find embarrassing for your child to know, you know, you might not put that where they can find it. That might be more for your partner. But it's, you know, the more they know how to help you, the more likely it is that they're going to be able to. Because the other problem is if you don't tell them ahead of time, just like if you don't plan it for yourself, if you don't tell them how to help you ahead of time, then when Maria needs help, she's probably not in the mood to say like, here, this is how to help me. You know, like you don't want to be going like, if you really knew me, you should know what you should be doing right now. You don't want to be that person. So I tell people, if you're comfortable sharing that, absolutely share it. This will be as a shocker. I'm sure this next slide to you. This is a great way for many people to like decompress. And if you're not in the initiated, it often sounds really horrible because you're making these like sort of darkly comic jokes, but it actually can help a lot of people. You don't have to do it, just like anything else. But like, you know, you can tell like this is one that I do a lot, is I like go with humor. And so I'll have residents and they'll say something and I'll be like, I'll reflect it back to them. Like, so basically what you're telling me is X, Y, and Z. And they're like, well, when you put it that way, it sounds really stupid. And my usual response that they've all learned now is, I'll let you just sit with that for a moment. And they're like, okay, that was probably not the best way to do it. Now, but gallows humor can, like, its big strength is it builds camaraderie within the team, which is important, but it can also alienate you if it falls flat. So you have to be careful about, like with all these things, how you use it. You have to make sure the other person likes it. This, for example, is another gallows humor that I like to throw out in psychiatry. Not that we promote violence, but you know, if somebody tells me to calm down, I quickly punch them in the throat and then tell them to stop grabbing their throat, because don't tell me how to feel. But let's see here. I'm trouble finding my arrows. So what other things can we do? Be respectful of our coworkers. Value their contributions. Like if I'm on a CERT activation, my favorite person, and they have no gender, age, or any other identifying characteristics, is whoever is going to fill out the forms in CERT. That is like my best bud. I value their contribution more than anything else. You know, meet regularly. And obviously on a team, if you're walking out, talk. That's a great meeting time. Like, well, hey, we're walking like 10 blocks to get to this place we got to go check out, and we're checking structures as we go. Let's problem solve. Hey, I really liked how you did this. Hey, let me tell you this joke about this, or, you know, something, you know, whatever it is. You're promoting cohesiveness, you're building the team. If there has to be changes, like if you're the incident commander and you're making a change about like, hey, like Sandra's no longer going to supervise this, then you should probably tell people, because people are going to like wonder, like, did Sandra do something wrong? Did I do something wrong? I was kind of with Sandra. Am I next on the chopping block? What's happening here? Keep people open. Don't let that like kind of angst grow. Everybody can contribute. Everybody can do something in CERT. Make sure you find the thing that they can do. And if there's a suggestion system, that's great. This would be obviously low, relatively low down on your like activations, but have something where people can actually sort of bring up a way to discuss with like the incident commander, like at the site or higher, like what's going on. Pass the communication around. Don't let conflicts brew. Talk about them. Like, hey, don't act that way towards me. I'd appreciate if you didn't do that. Okay, I'm sorry, but please don't raise your voice. Let's have a way we agree to handle these things. Be concrete. This is what I expect of you and how I want you to do it. The work is stressful. It gets people all the time. And it's better to be open about that, because you don't want to have like this false sense of bravado. Like in surgery, they would say things like, if you're on every other night, so you're on like 40 hours out of every 48, you're in the hospital on duty, that's called Q2, because you're on every other night. And they would say, the famous surgery saying was, the only problem with Q2 is you miss half the pathology. Usually followed by some kind of like semi-muscular, like muscle man pose to show how tough and cool you are, that you don't need sleep, because sleep is for the weak and all this. And it was kind of what a lot of people did, but it was also pretty stupid, you know. And it would be better to say like, yeah, this stresses you out. This is tough. Like, hey, we all need help. It's okay. And the promoting the idea that like, hey, if you're saying you're stressed out and you need a break, or someone else comes up to you and says you're stressed out and I'm worried about you, I don't want you to get stressed out, that's normal. I tell my residents all the time, like, I don't want a call from you midnight on a Sunday saying like you're totally burned out and you're not going to be able to be on at work on Monday morning and you are behind on all your assignments. I want you to tell me when you're about 70% there, because then there's room for us to like work and get things taken care of and take care of you. And that's kind of my approach to these things. Like, hey, what's the 100% is you're about to like just fall over, like dial it back. Tell me when you're about 65, 70%. You know, constantly reevaluating the situation, good sign out and communication about what's going on and what's happening. Put inexperienced people with experienced veterans. And this could be like, hey, I've done like 13 of these and you've done one. This could be, you've done 13 of these and I've only done one, but let me tell you, my background is in how to do disaster medical, and I know a lot about treating wounds. So even though you've been in CERT longer, I just happen to be better at this skill. So you might not just do it by time insert or something like that. You know, encouraging everyone, and they say partners, I would say team members, rotate from high stress to lower stress situations. Make sure people are taking breaks. If you're a team leader on a CERT team, we need to stop. Okay, hey, we just cleared this one building. We've done 3 now. We're going to take a break. We're going to take 5 minutes, just like everyone, get a drink of water, calm down. Do you need to call your loved ones at home, just check in on them? Okay, I want you to do that now. You know, you're normalizing it. You're making people take breaks, and maybe they won't, but you're at least making it normal that it's okay and expected. And if it's long as a deployment, you have to make longer breaks and you have to get people away. Again, stuff I tell people, do you want to be there for someone for 30 minutes? Because then go all out. Just, hey, go in. If you want to be there for like the 3 days or 30 days or 3 months or 9 months of this issue, you better pace yourself because no one runs that long. Respite areas for workers. Ideally, someplace they can shower, eat, change clothes, sleep. Obviously, in CERT, you can often go, theoretically, we should be able to go home. Make sure the schedules are flexible, that they can balance home and job responsibility. Again, big for CERT and first responders, because they got home, you got like a life outside of being like this CERT responder disaster worker. Try to give them someplace that's like not noisy so you can actually rest, or other ways to mitigate the environment. Obviously, we do pretty decently in CERT: protective clothing, shelter, proper hydration, frequent breaks. Good enough lighting. This is always a problem. I know like in Foster City, the parks aren't lit up generally. So like our trailers often have like some lighting that people try to bring. But like, you know, this is something like, hey, if you're near the deployment site and you have some portable lighting you can bring over that helps people like when it's dark, that's great if you're willing to do it and able to. Obviously, security, PPE, that people can communicate and you know who to communicate with are all things. Like, be professional, look professional, act professional. It has an incredibly calming effect, not only on the workers, but just on the victims of like whatever the disaster is. Like, hey, there's a bunch of people in uniform. They seem to know what they're doing. Like, I'll go with them, you know? That's one reason a lot of doctors wear white coats. I'm not a white coat guy, but that's what a lot of them like. They do it so they feel like a real doctor. You know, after the crisis is over, we often have ambivalent feelings. You get used to it. It's kind of like driving fast. If anyone's ever like done traffic school or recently been taking their teens driving, horrible, tragic, like terrifying situation of like a teenager driving and you're just sitting there trying to be calm. Like, okay, well, that wasn't the best left-hand turn, you know? That, you know, you get velocitated to it. Like there's a certain level of rush and commitment and meaning, and I'm doing this important stuff. And that can lead to a sense of loss after it's over. Just like you come off the freeway and all of a sudden everyone's like crawling when they're going 30. Like day-to-day jobs just don't seem to like have it a lot of times. So give people time off. Step them down. Don't go from like 60 to 0, go from 60 to 45 to 30 to like calmer. The counseling, huge. I think this is something like in CERT that we should think about more, is like as we're winding operations down that have been particularly stressful, having like educational workshops available for people where we just talk about like what went on and like what to expect. Self-care activities and acknowledgements, like, hey, everybody did a great job. And if you can call people out, that's great. Can have a little bit of a feeling like a participation trophy, but like, hey, you did all participate and you do all deserve trophies. So, you know, I love this slide because this is like just some quick ideas. Forgive me, I could not find Niners or other local teams, but like, you know, you're just playing sports. You're just like, hey, like you could imagine like this at one of our parks, like You got a couple of the workers, we're just going to go goof off and play a game. Hey, like, here's some people, like, I know no mask, no social distancing. I'm sorry, this is pre-pandemic, but like just chatting, talking, sharing. Have a meal. I think this is a great one for disasters. Like the simplest, kindest thing, like in some of the big storm disasters they've had in the East, like people are like, hey, I have power. I'm putting out some power strips for people to charge their devices. Because, you know, none of us are addicted to our devices, right? We're all like, oh, I could go without my cell phone. I hate those things, right? My God, where is it? You know, it's been 30 seconds without the internet. I don't know what's happening right now. So doing some stuff that can help you. Now, things not to do. So take in the moment. You might notice, let's imagine this is Foster City. There's been a bit of a problem. You know, there's a little trash on the streets. The water level is a little high at the levee. Somebody took a wrong turn. Kids are playing with matches out here, right? Okay. Horrible, obviously. So what don't you want to say to somebody who's being through this? So we're CERT, we go out there. Don't cry. Come on. Turn that smile upside down. Or turn that frown upside down. Buck up, little camper, you know. Don't feel bad. Why? Why would you feel bad? It's God's will. Always a great one to say. You're strong. You'll get through this. I'm sure you can like move that ship no problem. Somebody got it there. Somebody can get it away. At least you still have a roof. Granted, it's in your neighbor's front yard 3 houses away, but you still have it. It could be worse. Hey, at least you got water. Look over there. It's like, that looks like toxic smoke, you know. Everything will be okay. I understand. You don't want to do those things. You, again, want to listen when you want to talk. How can I help you? Oh my gosh. You know, and you even want to be careful with like, how are you holding up? Oh, peachy. It's great. Now we got us a boat, you know. Man, I cannot imagine what you're going through. How can I help you? How can I be there for you? What would be useful for you? Is there someone I can help you contact? I can't imagine all the things you need, but what are some things that you might think of? And when people talk, listen to their words, the content. I need like salami, I don't, you know, like, and bread. But also listen to what we in psychiatry call the process, the themes, the meaning. You know, and that's where like, I had a person recently, like, I don't compare myself to these other people, but, and then went through a litany of like 5 people that like, and this person's smarter than me, and this person's done this, and this person had a procedure and was back on their feet. And I'm like, you know, sort of gently, because I'm doing therapy, seems like you're comparing yourself a lot to that. So I reflected back on that. It seems like you're feeling like you aren't doing as well as they are. What do you make of that? You know, very therapy sounding, I know. Watch for their nonverbal communication. If I'm like, I am not angry, why would you say I'm angry? You know, like, okay, well, he's saying the content is he's not angry, but he might be talking about how he's pissed off about everybody and people keep screwing him over. And boy, his fists are clenched and tight. And that's not usually like the opening salvo of like, exactly, Maria. Like, that's not usually the opening salvo of like, and hey, why don't you come over and we'll share a nice calm meal? It's like, okay, if that person is like cooking for you, don't, you know, let somebody else try it first to see what happens. Watch their behavior. Are they pacing around? Are they slamming their hand against the wall? If you're concerned about someone, ask for help. Get help. Ask them like how they're doing. How can I be there for you? Boy, you know, I'm amazed at how you're sort of portraying yourself as so calm after like what you went through. Just, not an observation. I'm not calling you out, not saying you're lying, but I'm giving you the opportunity to tell me something. Paraphrasing the speaker, man, I am famished. I haven't eaten in 7 days. I don't know where my next meal is coming from. Sounds like you're really hungry. Food's an issue. Why don't we go like over to the supply area and we'll get you hooked up with some food? That be okay? Be present, not just there. So be like actively mentally present and with the person, not just sort of standing there. So just want to like wind up with like, as I promised, like what did we learn or some things we learned at UCSF from the pandemic thus far? So we had to mobilize resources to screen people for a disease, treat them if they have infection. We also had to do other ongoing services. So like people who had like heart attacks and strokes, infections, other surgeries. And we didn't know how big a surge or surges we would get. We didn't know how long the surges would last. So if you've driven by like the UCSF campus, like on Parnassus, like up on the hill by Twin Peaks, the ER parking lot is gone. It's like fenced off, and we have like these like mobile like respiratory isolation units which sit sort of right outside my windows. I kind of glance, like always made me and some of my colleagues feel a little bit uncomfortable about like, okay, can we open our windows? I'm not sure if I want the exhaust fans going off in my office. But we're prepared for a big surge. The organization itself has over 25,000 employees. And they have stress from a variety of sources, including work and non-work, caring for people who are sick. The patients are more stressed out because you can't have visitors. The visitors are more stressed out because they can't get in to see their loved one. It's, people are sheltering in place. There's financial stuff, partners and friends and family members losing jobs, etc. And there's only so much mental health resources to support the employees and the patients. And I'm going to focus on the employees for this, but they wanted to know how to allocate these limited resources in a reasonable way to do the most good for the most people. So we developed an app that people could get on their mobile devices or desktop computers. And it was based on, surprisingly, the medical triage model, right? So people wanted to do all kinds of amazing things. And just like we teach you not to do in CERT, I'm going to stop here and give you like your annual physical for all 30 people on the bus as I try to triage you, right? And that's not what we're going to do. That's sort of where a lot of people wanted to go. But we basically did a color-coded triage system as people fill out this app. And this is where my kids criticized me because we did not have black. We only had green, yellow, and red. So I apologize for anyone in the audience who really wanted us to have like black as part of our triage here, but we didn't. So green, they get sent by the app to pages online for self-care resources because they have like minor symptoms. These are the people like no abnormal vital signs in medical triage, etc. Yellow, symptoms needed additional evaluation by a professional, possibly ongoing treatment. Red, you screened as needing emergency treatment. So these are the people who are unconscious, hemorrhaging, cap refills off, those sorts of things. Takes about 30 seconds to a minute to fill out the app. So not as good as medical triage, but you also have to read a bunch of questions, but it's pretty short. And people are told, here's what your results and what our recommendations are, and then we direct you to the appropriate resources. So far, we've had over 25,000 as of this morning open the app. About 1,900 have started it, have actually started filling it out. 400 have been referred for treatment. So you can see about a little over 20% have screened as needing further assessment and treatment. Over 550, so a higher number, have been directed to self-care resources. Some people have stopped, so we don't have all the numbers adding up. And about 1.5% have been screened as needing emergency services because they or someone they're with or someone that they know further afield is in danger. This, I can tell you, a 500-person waiting list would take us about, with our current capacity, it takes us about 6 months to get through. So here we've screened, vastly more than that using these sort of basic CERT principles. So just a plug for like what you're learning is really useful. And what we found is most of the people who've needed treatment have needed this sort of psychological first aid and interventions that we're talking about. They're learning skills and being reminded of skills to help manage stress and talk themselves down. The vast majority don't need medications, for example. So some activities that you can do, and you can read more about these because we're recording this and Sandra has all my slides. To boost resilience, find something funny. Spend 10 minutes at the end of the day where you just think about the 3 funniest things that you experienced or saw that day and reflect on why. Why was this funny? It took me back to the old days. It was carefree. It was happy. It was just so silly, or, it made me smile. It reminded me of like my first date with whoever, Obviously, to Sandra's earlier question, you might not want to share with your partner if it reminded you, for example, in that example of like your first date with someone other than your partner, unless it was comically bad. So just sort of a pro tip life hack at the end there. And the idea is some people feel like this boosts resilience. I would say at the very least, it reframes your day in a positive way at the end. As bad as my day was, I can still find some stuff to laugh at and find joy in. Another one that you can do sort of day to day, takes a few minutes, is progressive muscle relaxation. You basically trick your body into thinking it's relaxed, and you thereby trick your brain. So you go through major muscle groups like clenching your fists, your forearms, your biceps, your triceps, leg muscles, facial muscles, like open your eyes really wide, close your eyes really tight, smile like you're taking a cheesy 4th grade school picture, bite down like you're trying to chew through something tough. And every muscle group that you do that, you hold it for 15 to 30 seconds clenched, and then you let the muscle relax. And the idea is you do that once or twice, and your muscles get tired. They can't stay tense, and your brain gets feedback that like the muscles are relaxed, therefore there should be nothing to worry about. It's not a dangerous situation because that automatic nervous system, like your muscles tense up when there's something dangerous. So you can kind of trick your brain into thinking things are better than perhaps they are. This is one that you do once or twice a day, every day as practice, and then you do it extra when you need it. Abdominal breathing, you basically put your hands like this. So your thumbs are on the bottom of your rib cage where it forms an upside down V. You breathe in through your nose, slowly and deeply as far as you can. You pause when your lungs are just filled to bursting and hold it for a second. And then you purse your lips and breathe out really slow. Your hands should come up or out when you're breathing in because you're using your abdominal muscles, and they'll fall down when you breathe out. And when you do this, you will take about twice as long to exhale as to inhale, which for a former surgeon, I love that because it's like how we sent ventilators in the ICU, but it's also how we naturally breathe when we're asleep. And it actually turns on that parasympathetic, the rest, recuperate, and recover part of the nervous system, and turns down the fight or flight. So you can actually consciously affect how those systems work. And if you practice it 3 to 5 minutes a day, like when you're falling asleep, when you need it during the day, during a meeting, while you're driving, you can start doing it again. And what people find is they get more skillful with this kind of relaxation. It takes 1 or 2 breaths. They're in a meeting. They're like, okay, hey, you know, Ursula, why don't you tell me your thoughts on this? And I do a couple deep breaths. I look pretty natural. I'm just listening to you talk. And then I'm much calmer when I come back to explain like why I disagree or whatever, you know. So that is this one. And again, you'll get all these. So I'm just sort of going over them fast. I love this one because it's teamwork. Kind of takes me back to the first one. The weather has dried out the land, and it's not just one guy trying to like pick up the pieces of everything. Everyone's pitching in around a common goal, taking care of themselves. They're wearing their PPE, and they're just sort of, everyone's doing a little piece, but like by a lot of people doing a little tiny piece and doing their jobs, things are going to get better. And that's how you get through this. Couple more of these exercises. 3 good things. End of the day, instead of 3 funny things, you think about 3 things you're grateful for. And it could be, hey, I expected my boss to yell at me in that meeting and she didn't. It could be, I wasn't expecting to like see an old friend of mine and he texted me and we ended up having a great conversation. It was really nice, you know? And again, 10 minutes as to why that was meaningful, why that was good. Reframing, any day can have some good things. Same with like gratitude, like, you know, specifically, why am I glad this happened? And an interesting one, which kind of like, you know, is great in many ways, except if you're a first responder or a CERT person, you're probably doing this all the time anyway, so you might want to find something else, but not that you have to. But you just sort of say like, every day you show one person some extra kindness. And this is the idea of like, okay, I'm like at McDonald's and I paid for the food of the person behind me in line. I paid the toll on the bridge for the next person behind me. I just stopped and helped one person like get their groceries to the car because, I don't know, I was lucky the other day and I felt bad because I didn't get out of my car fast enough, but this person's cart like went running away and I was like, if I wasn't so tangled in my like cell phone and like seatbelt, I would have like run out to like help the poor person like capture their shopping cart. But that would have been a nice thing to do. But I never said I was a kind person. And the last one that I'll just put up here is just to think about your purpose. And this is something to do more, again, ahead of time, like, why are you? Not who are you, or where are you, or when are you, or what are you, but why are you? Why are you here? Why do you get up in the morning? What keeps you awake at night? When do you feel the most alive? What does success mean? How do you pursue your gifts? Like, you know, I love history and I would love to do something with that. If you could make a difference in one person's life today, what would that be? You know, so you can sort of see these things, and this is sort of the idea of just who you are, why you are, and what your purpose is. And this might be like, before you do a deployment, like in CERT, why did I join CERT? I mean, who doesn't love a cute construction guy helmet? And who doesn't love the cool vests that we all get and wearing a backpack? But there might be other reasons. And just reflecting on that. Why am I putting myself into these positions where I'm doing for others? You know, so I know that that went long, but just wanted to sort of go over some of those things, because a lot of these are just really about preparing yourself ahead of time. You don't want to, again, you don't want to take up weightlifting when a rock's on your foot. You want to be prepared. And the more you do that for your mental health, the easier this stuff is.
John, thank you so much. What I'm going to do is those slides with the activities that Dr. John had, I will get those available to you. Be patient, please, with me, but I will get them to you.
Be thankful she's doing it instead of me. With my tech havoc, we'd all like lose our internet forever if I tried to distribute it. So.
I'll tell you, the tech learning curve has been very steep these last few months. It's been good. It's been good. One of the questions that I had come up was, and I do this myself. I have always said, my saying has always been, I can do anything as long as I know the end date, right? Well, we
Yep.
don't have an end date for this pandemic. This is a long haul type of event.
Yep.
So those suggestions you had, I think those activities are really, really helpful. A couple of them I use quite often myself, so I will promote those and send those out to the attendees.
Yeah.
That's the hard part. The hard thing is you think you're fine, everything's fine, then all of a sudden you're not, and that's, I guess, normal. Yes.
Yeah, I think, it's kind of defensive that, you push yourself, you just keep going, and we are often the worst judges of ourselves, which seems paradoxical, because who would know me better than me? Like, well, probably everybody around me who spends like more than 30 seconds with me. And, it's the vast majority of us, we're going to kind of keep chugging along, pushing along until we get to the point that we can't and the bottom falls out. And medically, I'm used to that, because you'll see like people are sort of tootling along after they're like in a traumatic accident or they're in the ICU and they're sort of petering along, and you're sort of watching, okay, I can see that, like, okay, we're having to use more invasive support for their respiratory system. We're doing more things to keep their blood pressure up. We're doing more things to keep their kidneys functioning, and they're petering along, and you sort of like get this sense of like, okay, I'm not exactly sure when, but we're coming up to the point where like we've maxed out all the interventions. And I think like in people around you, it's easy to see like, hey, Bob's like getting a little bit short-tempered. Bob's getting a little angry. But it's hard for ourselves, because especially if you're in a giving or caring professional role, and CERT I would put down as part of that, it's not about me. I didn't get into CERT, as I was sort of joking about, because I like the vest, like, great, I love the vest, don't get me wrong, Kendra, but like, don't take away my vest. But as much as I love the vest, like, I'm there because I want to like help my community and stuff, and I don't help. And like kind of the sort of simplistic way I can look at it is having to like help my community is not focusing on me and my needs. I need to deny that, deny. I'm going to stuff those feelings down. And when you can't stuff anymore, I jump on them and stuff some more. And then sooner or later, it's going to collapse. And what you need to do is like have that sort of thing I was saying about like, when am I about 70% full? Like, I just snapped at my partner. I went to go play with my dog and I did not enjoy that. Like, something is going wrong, or ideally, I didn't enjoy it as much, because then if you get to the point like you don't enjoy it at all, then it's like you're really far along the burnout sort of spectrum. But if you get like, I used to enjoy this a lot more, like, hey, Sandy, maybe would it be okay if I like took some time? I need to go like regroup.
Right.
No, never, ever. No. Do you know what Sandra will do to us if you take time off? Like, she's going to kill us all. Like,
No.
we're going to be like, no, exactly. You want somebody to say like, of course you need to take time off. Cool. Hey.
And that's why we have so many people, right? We can rotate, many hands make light work, and it works.
Yeah, like, hey, Maria just got here and we haven't, it's perfect timing. Like, and I even like kind of go a little bit over, like, hey, it's perfect time. Maria just showed up. She didn't have a team for us to put her on. Why don't you go like rotate off, go get yourself caught up, let us know when things are feeling better. We're going to put her on the team because your team's got some experience. She's coming in, she's fresh to this deployment. This is great. I'm so glad that you told me. Like, you don't want to oversell it, but
Right.
I'm not going to win an Oscar, but like, it's, you want to like make sure that people understand it's okay. And in fact, it's good, because that is what we want. We want people to be reaching out early. And I would look for those subtle cues. And because we're bad judges of it for ourselves, that's where we need our teammates to check in. two of my residents just last week were like, I can't remember what I said. I said something, and I think I was just being sarcastic. And this one resident was like, oh my God, not you. You can't be burned out. What'll we do? It'll fall apart. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, like, thank you for your concern, but I am not like burnt out. But like, yeah, and then we talked about it, like why they were concerned about it and what they saw. And then like everyone sort of was like, okay, cool. Like we processed it, we sort of assessed it and stuff. But that's what you want. Yeah.
Patrick has his hand raised. Patrick, did you have a question, Pat? You can unmute yourself.
The quote of 2020.
Maybe not.
You're
Yes,
on mute.
you can mute, or please unmute.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Dr. John Chamberlain, thank you. This was wonderful and perfect timing, quite literally. Speaking of lovely vests, the vest that, the fleece vests that I told you about that was donated will go to Therese. Therese, I will be in touch with you. You were the correct number to sign in, and I'll be in touch with you to let you know how to get your lovely new vest.
Wow.
Everybody, have a wonderful rest of the evening. Be safe, be well, be CERT, be aware, check in with each other and with me from time to time. And it's always great to hear from you all. And I'll let you know when our next CE class is ready to go. All right.
And yeah, take care of yourself. Those 5 or 10 minutes every day makes a huge difference. Thank you, everybody.
Time for yourselves, everybody. Dr. John, you rock. Thanks so much. Everybody have
You
a good night.
hurricane rock, though.
Take it easy.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.